Hey guys, in this video I will be evaluating how hard each dungeon is from a healer perspective, based on my testing from playing on the PTR. So let's get right into it. The Rookery is not that much of a difficult dungeon. There are some places where you do need to heal, such as on this bird here for the localized storm, but it is just a typical AoE pulse damage and nothing else really attached to it. There are a couple of these mobs in the room and that's about it. This trash over here has some overlaps between the suck and the targeted arcing void, but as long as you press the defensive, it doesn't do too much damage. So yeah, nothing really too life-threatening in this dungeon at all. The MOTHERLODE is a pretty easy dungeon for healers, relatively speaking. If you decide to do this first pull, then it'll be a little spooky because there's a lot of mobs that are kind of dangerous, but you also have Lust to help you, and you do not need to pull it like how we did in this clip. This trash over here after the first boss can also be a little bit dangerous, but nothing too hard to handle. The challenging part of this pull is that you have to dodge circles while healing, so if you're a class that can't do that very well, you'll have to pre-plan your healing, such as on Disc Priest, you have to pre-ramp. These war machines are probably the most dangerous part of this dungeon. They do an AoE pulse damage, and they spawn these crawler mines as well that fixate you, so you basically have to keep up the healing while kiting this mine at the same time. And this double pull at the very end is probably the most difficult part of the dungeon. Your best bet is to just focus one down and use your biggest personals in the beginning when they overlap. So yeah, just a couple of challenging places to heal in this dungeon, but outside of that, none of the bosses are hard to heal, and everything else that I didn't go over are pretty much self-explanatory. This is Theater of Pain. I wouldn't say this is too difficult of a dungeon to heal, but there are definitely some mechanically challenging aspects. This mini-boss here definitely hurts a bit. This is my first time seeing it, and I wasn't really prepared, outside of Yoda telling me
There's gonna be a lot of healing needing to be done soon.
but it wasn't too hard to heal. This boss isn't too difficult for healers, you just have to be aware of dodging the orbs at all times while healing this dot over here. It spawns on 2 people at a time. This mini-boss over here has somewhat of a mild amount of damage, but it can be a little deadly if it overlaps with the little leaping ads, kind of like the flyers in Arakara. You can see the Red Paladin got leaped on multiple times in a row and just died. So just be careful, pop defensives here so that you live that overlap and you should be good. But again, this is on a 15 and it is still not too much of a danger, so that's why I am not rating this too difficult. This boss can be a little tricky because there are a lot of overlapping mechanics that will make this fight harder than usual, but in terms of actual healing throughput, not much is required. The difficulty of this fight is healing while also dodging all the mechanics. This is Darkflame Cleft. It is pretty middle of the pack compared to the other dungeons this season. First area is definitely probably the hardest trash of the entire dungeon. You get constantly thrown rocks. As you can see there, we kind of just died to that. It can be deadly here when there is an overlap of the AoE and the throw rocks, which is what happened to me and the shaman at the start of that pull. These overseers are the ones that do that AoE damage, called the overpowering roar, and there are 2 of them in this second pull here, so you just have to make sure people are tops in between each one. Next challenging part of the trash is this part where these candles do the quenching blast, and we're pulling all of them at once, so they're just going off. As long as people are tops in between each one, we should not die. This boss can seem tricky at first, but once you understand the mechanics, it's not that bad. So basically, whenever you get these red arrows, you want to light up as many candles as possible. As a priest, I couldn't quite make it without pre-positioning. If you do it properly, you can light up 2 candles at once. And the more candles you light up, the fewer stacks of this dot you will get, which is a lot of healing if it stacks up. That was 3 stacks right there. This trash here isn't too bad. It just does the stomp every once in a while, and as long as you kick the bolts and they don't overlap with the stomp, then you should be safe. This boss definitely requires more healing. So whenever you have those molds, there is a ton of rot damage going out until you clear them, and they're pretty much there throughout the entire fight. You only have a tiny window where there are no molds at all, and you basically have to keep healing up the entire fight. You get a small break over here, but then the molds spawn immediately, so that is what makes this boss a little tricky for healers that don't have constant healing all the time. And then of course there is the last boss. This boss isn't really too bad. There is a pulse damage every once in a while, but as long as you have healing saved up for it, it's very manageable. It also targets someone with a Shadow Blast sometimes, and as long as they have a personal for it, it's not too bad. But yeah, Darkflame Cleft, not too difficult, but also not easy. Here is Cinderbrew Meadery. So the beginning trash is actually one of the more difficult ones. The hired muscles do a huge dot that you have to heal through, but on the first pull you get Lust, so it's not too bad. These circle dots are dispellable and they don't really do too much damage, so it's not the worst. Chef Shiri is definitely worth fighting alone with some non-harmful adds, because this AoE damage here can kill you if it overlaps with other things, and it also spawns circles that you have to dodge. But outside of that, it is not too hard to heal. You have plenty of time to top people off before the next AoE goes out. First boss isn't too difficult. It puts out a huge dot on people and you just have to heal through it with defensives. I believe Zorthar took a tick of the ground effect and that's why he died, but just the dot itself does not hurt too much. And during this happy hour phase, you normally just have the healer stay and heal while other people go and grab the drinks. So these hobgoblins can be dangerous. The Reckless Delivery does a huge chunk of damage to everyone in the group as it hits the wall, and if it overlaps with any other casts, you can die. However, just by themselves, they are not too harmful as long as you top people off before the next one goes off. The third boss does have some pulsing AoE damage that you have to heal through, but overall, it's not too dangerous. This last boss is definitely the hardest boss of the dungeon. It is very similar to Stonevault's first boss, where you have to break cannons and you will get a dot on you. So here we broke 2 and we have 2 stacks. The key is to not break too many at once and kind of spread it out so that you can heal through the damage. Every once in a while it blows up all the barrels at once and does the inevitable AoE damage, but if you break all the barrels before it happens, then you will take minimal damage. There is definitely damage going out the entire fight, and you have to make sure you keep your ramp up at all times. Squishy classes may need externals as well. Next up is Mechagon Workshop. I would say that there are a couple of challenging places in this dungeon to heal. I've only ran this dungeon one time, so this is pretty much the first time I've healed it, and the fact that we got through it on a 15 just goes to show that it is not too difficult, but also not easy. This is the first hard part of the dungeon, which is this trash here. It throws on double heal absorb on you. If you pull 2 of them at a time, you have a decent amount of time to top people off, so it's not too dangerous. These dogs can be dangerous if you don't have dispels available, because it leaves a dot on you that stacks, but it is dispellable, so if you're not a priest with mass dispel, you do want to manage the dispels very well. This boss isn't too difficult. You need to make sure you dispel your tank immediately, and it'll also explode damage onto your group, so you have to make sure your group is topped up at all times and ready for the tank dispel. This trash here is also a little bit dangerous. There is an AoE pulse damage from the MK3. This boss does have a little of a heal check. It just constantly does AoE damage to you, and you have to make sure people are topped. However, once again, this is a 15, and for it to not completely kill us on a 15 just goes to show that the scaling isn't too bad. These spider tanks are probably the hardest healing check in the whole dungeon, and I definitely missed the first round of this because It was my first time saying it, but once I found out just how hard it was, I don't know if I was able to recover as a disc priest. And then phase 2 of this last boss is the more challenging part for healing. Phase 1 doesn't really have much healing to do. He puts out dots on people, and there was a suck phase in the middle, but damage isn't too bad. Priory is definitely one of the most difficult dungeons of the season, both for healing and every other role. In the beginning here, there's a lot of trash that shoots people at all times, kind of like the trash in No Coup Defensive, if you remember, in Dragonflight Season 4. But you basically have to constantly AoE stop or just keep people topped through healing. And this is literally on the first pull, so it's already getting chaotic in here. This mini-boss does the thunderclap every once in a while, and it's just huge AoE damage to everyone. Although it is definitely not the worst mob in here because you have plenty of time to heal people back up before the next one goes off. This mini-boss is also annoying because it does a lunging strike on one person, which puts a dot on them for a couple seconds, but it cleaves. So, if it targets a melee and you have a full melee comp like we have here, it basically applies the dot to everyone in the group. You can try to spread out to prevent that as much as possible if you're a full melee comp, but it is definitely very annoying to deal with. So because we killed the priestess, this boss will cast a Holy Radiance, which is an AoE pulse damage, periodically. However, if you have your healing available, then you should be able to heal through this with no major issues. And if anything, you can always get through it with defensives. This is the most dangerous trash in the dungeon, for sure. These Ardent Paladins cast an ability called Sacred Toll, and it does more than half your health, so you have to keep people constantly topped here. As you can see, there are 3 of these paladins when we pull, and they cast 3 of these Sacred Tolls back to back. You basically have to top people immediately. As you can see, their HP bar goes down, up, and down, and up very quickly. This boss can be tricky to deal with if you're not doing it properly. It's kind of like the same mechanic as Stone Vault, where you do want to soak some orbs so that they don't all explode at once. Our tank is going to soak one of those right now, and look at how much damage that did to us. You definitely don't want them exploding all at the same time. And when you soak it, it also does a lot of damage to you. So whoever is soaking that orb will need to pop huge defensives. But yep, throughout the fight there will be a ton of healing that you constantly have to deal with, which is what makes this fight more difficult than most. When you get to this mini-boss, it is basically like a mini Kajin if you played in Dragonflight Season 4. It's just constant rot damage the entire time. And the tricky part for some healers like this priest is you don't have your ramp available constantly. So whenever you have downtime on your ramp, you definitely want to either use a lot of defensives or fill with your evangelism or your uppies. But yep, another healing intensive mini boss right here to deal with. This boss can be a little tricky when you're first learning it, because when there is the blinding light, you have to turn around. So you basically have to time your healing so that you have something to cast while you have to turn around for the blinding light. Then when you get to phase 2, during the shield phase, once again, AoE pulse damage is constant and you have ads running at you. If they start meleeing you, you will most likely die. At the same time, you can get this beam chasing you, and you just have to plan out your healing if you're a healer class that needs to not move. So yeah, lots of healing throughout the entire dungeon, as well as required coordination with your group and a very tight timer. The hardest dungeon in my opinion is Operation Floodgate. The first boss is difficult because it is both a healer and a DPS check. There will be a shield phase where it does pulse damage until you kill all the ads. And right after you kill the ads, there will be a second AoE pulse damage. So you basically have to keep up healing for that entire time. Next, you have this trash mob over here called the Blood Warper, which throws out a huge heal absorb and does a ton of pulse AoE damage. And as you can see here, even though I have my full ramp in max level gear, I am still barely able to keep up. Over here you have these loader bots that cast windups, and if you're a full melee comp, it hurts a lot. The only way you can CC it is by stunning them, and in most comps you don't have enough stuns to interrupt every single one of them, so you end up just having to either heal through or just pop defensives for it. The third boss is also somewhat of a healing trick, but is way more manageable because you can generally live with enough defensives. As you can see, this is a lot of damage even on a plus 12. And if you're not playing classes that have a ton of defensives, eventually you're going to run out. This mini boss right here also does a ton of group AoE pulse damage. Look at how much damage it does on a plus 12. These two jump starters before the last boss also hurts a ton, as both of them do AoE damage alternating, and you basically have to keep everyone topped at all times, or they will just die. The last boss isn't the most difficult to heal, but there will be guaranteed overlaps throughout the fight, where you will have to either pop more defensives or have externals for. And there you have it. That's all of the difficult fights of every single dungeon, and overall I would say the Season 2 dungeons are harder than the Season 1 dungeons for healing in particular, but I also think it's going to be way more fun. I will be coming out with proper healing guides for each dungeon very soon, so stay tuned. I also stream all of my keys on Twitch and YouTube, so feel free to check it out if you want to see me live. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Good luck in Season 2!